Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 21st edition of the Node Operator Community Call. My name is Sven. I'll be your MC today. We always say we have an action-packed agenda, but we really do this this time. We always do, but especially action-packed this time. So we're gonna try to keep it packed as well, not just action, but keep it packed. So we have Sasha starting up, Lido contributor with the Validator set updates for this month. After that, we have our regular Will back from Asia, talking a bit about the simple DVT, the latest updates. We have Max talking about the hottest research of this particular day. It's the hottest research of the month, as far as I'm concerned, but it's been especially talked about today on the Twitterverse. It's about minimal bondage for the CSM module. After that, we have some cool guests. We have David from Rock Logic talking about Stereum. It's aimed at CSM, but of course you can use Stereum for all kinds of staking, solo or otherwise. And finally, we have Drew van der Werf, who is actually not as Dutch as he sounds, talking about Commit Boost from Commit Boost. So Sasha, if you are ready to go, you can share your screen and take it away, please.
Okay, yes, I seem to be ready. Hey everyone, I'll indeed quickly cover the main highlights of the past month, trying to keep it short as the agenda, as Sven mentioned today, is pretty packed. So let's dive right in. First up, we have two really cool podcasts that Dmitry from Community Staking Contributors Group participated in. The first one is with Wag, who is an irreplaceable host of Rocket Fuel, and the second one with eStaker Community. So I personally would say that I'm really grateful that we were invited to this podcast because it's definitely worth watching. And these two podcasts are really cool because they cover different aspects of solo staking in general and CSM in particular from different points of views. Like by representatives of different solo stakers communities with different opinions. And I'm curious if someone can count how many times I said the word different in last sentence. Anyway, September updates will be published in coming week and on the Node Operator portal. And you can find all the links to these calls there. But if you want to watch it right now, you can simply go to eStaker and Rocket Pool YouTube channels. Okay. Moving next, here we have community grants for CSM resources. So it's an initiative that was started by Lido Community Lifeguards that aims to both increase the variety of guides and tutorials of how to set a CSM validator and incentivize community members for basically their effort. The gist of this initiative is that people can create their own guides, share them with community, and receive a retroactive grant. So the first round of this initiative will mostly focus on guides and explainers in different languages to increase accessibility and adoption of CSM. This round ends at September 30th, and it means that there is still a little bit of a time to apply. So as a result of this initiative plus our community lifeguards effort, now we have quite a lot of resources about CSM for all tastes, and you can find one that suits you the best. And we put together the database that will help you to find one. So getting further, of course, community staking module. So the CSM testnet has been running for almost 3 months. And by today, we have more than 2,300 node operators participated, more than 4,800 validators activated, and 5 absolutely amazing integrations with plug-and-play tools that basically make it easier to start your CSM journey and to maintain your node. So I have to say that testnet overall is going really well, in my opinion, and I really enjoy how involved our node operators are. So we get a lot of really valuable feedback that help us to improve like our UI, our documentation, and educational materials. And I really want to thank every CSM node operator, at least who is listening to this call right now, for your dedication and contribution. All right, what's next? Yeah, so testnet is good, but what about mainnet? So we are getting closer and closer to it, and all the test scenarios has been already checked, and there are 2 ongoing audits of CSM code going on right now, with no high and critical findings so far, and both audits expected to be finalized in October. So also in anticipation of mainnet, the early adoption list for CSM should be updated. And here basically I outlined 2 additional resources that will be utilized for mainnet early adoption list. Firstly, good performance of the CSM testnet will be proposed to be included into this list, and the performance of testnet participants will be assessed at the end of September. And additionally, Gnosis solo stakers will be proposed to be included in early adoption list on mainnet, as well as solo stakers on Ethereum. And Dmitry did a big overview of the early adoption list mechanics during last node operator community call. So for those who are interested, definitely check it out. So what we have next? Here's a bit of a spoiler that the parameters for CSM mainnet were proposed, but Max will talk about them a little later during this call. It seems that I'm running out of time, but yeah. So the last thing that I want to mention is that we've been to Asia, we've participated in a lot of events. Here I just want to quickly highlight that before each conference, we'll try to put together this list of the conferences where we are participating and where you can find Lido contributors if you want to. And we had a really amazing solo stakers gathering in Singapore. I was really excited to see a lot of people talking about solo staking, discussing stuff and sharing their experience. So we met more than 90 people there, and of course, we did a traditional raffle of DAppNode. And looking a bit to the future, just save the date, November 14th, Bangkok, the biggest Lido event. So stay tuned for the updates, and that's it from my side, and I'm passing mic back to Sven.
Thanks, Sasha. That was great. I think I may have rushed you a bit. That was not the point, but that was a great update. We'll just continue with Will. He's up next. I think this is the first time he's going to talk about simple DVT, so he might be a bit nervous for this thing, but let's all welcome him, give him a warm welcome. I think he'll do just fine. Will, you can take it away when you're ready.
Thanks very much. I'm extremely nervous, so I appreciate that, Sven. Hey everyone, so my name is Will, obviously. I'm a contributor in the Node Operator Mechanisms workstream. And today's status update for the Simple DBT module is that scaling is continuing. So just today, there was a big batch of deposits that went through, and the module is now at 1,365 validators. As a reminder, that is expected to go somewhere in the range of 12,000 validators over the next few months as the cohorts all onboard and have their key limits increased. And so we'll talk a little bit more in depth on what the status is there. So kicking off with OBO. On the first side, which is cohort 1. So as a reminder, these are the first 12 Simple DBT clusters that launched. They are now all currently running 80 validators each. And as you might remember from the Simple DBT expansion proposal, basically that proposal called for all of the normal clusters, which are cohort 1, cohort 2, the future cohorts 3s, both OBO and SSV, to run at least 80 validators. And so right now, cohort 1 will sit at 80 validators probably for the next couple months as the rest of the cohorts across Simple DBT sort of get to a catch-up period. At that time, it'll sort of be determined how many validators there are available, depending on what 4% of Lido's share equates to in terms of the total number of validators. And potentially that number of validators will then be increased across the normal clusters, but that will be a couple months away. On the side of superclusters, so the 5 OBO superclusters currently actually has had those 10 depositable keys deposited to today. So the key limit for those clusters are going to be increased to 50 validators. We'd expect to see something on the research forum in the next day or two highlighting that the easy track for this is out. You'll also remember from that expansion proposal that these clusters all are allowed to run up to 50 validators within the first 2-week performance monitoring period. So we'll make sure that the validators activate smoothly and that there's no issues. And if that is the case in the next couple of days, you'll see key limits go there to 50 validators. Once those 50 validators are deposited to, there's this 2-week monitoring period, and then quickly you'll see the 50 go to 200. There will be another 2-week monitoring period once those are filled, and then you'll see all of those clusters go up to 500 validators. So huge amount of validators will be activating in SimpleDBT from these super clusters over the next month or two. On the cohort 2 side, so there's actually a research forum post in the SimpleDBT proposal thread earlier today, because the first monitoring period is now complete for cohort 2. So within cohort 2, there was 14 clusters. There's actually 13 clusters that are included within this performance report because the Vivacious Viper cluster had a replacement. So their validators were actually just deposited to again today. And so they'll kick off another performance monitoring period before their key limits are proposed to be increased. But performance overall was really, really solid here. So uptime of 99.98%. And validator effectiveness of 97.58% as per rated. Both of those metrics are actually higher than the metrics for a longer running group of cohort 1 validators. So really promising on that side. You will see the block proposal success rate of 76.92% is probably a bit below where we would like to see it. So a couple things to keep in mind here. It's a pretty small sample size. There was 10 successful proposals out of 13. The 3 missed block proposals are all due to different variations of user config issues during their setup process. So the Lido Obol Charon validator repo basically was updated a few weeks ago. There's a good number of node operators that use this as a reference. It addressed the config issues to make sure that those using the repo are all set up with the correct config. There's also a round of confirmations that went out to the other many node operators that are running custom setups. And since that has all taken place, there's been 100% block proposal success rate. So I think in general, things are looking really good here. On the Obol testnet 4 status, so this testnet, as you'll remember, ended last month. There is a blog post that is likely to be published in the next week and a half or so, and that'll be very quickly followed by the Lido node operator subgovernance group meeting, following which there will be a post to the research forums regarding which participants are proposed to move forward in cohort 3 for Obol. So stay tuned, more info on that coming in the next couple of weeks. On the SSV side, so cohort 1 is now running 20 validators each. These have all been deposited to for about a week and a half. So expect to see an increase of their key limits to 40 validators later this week. Currently, the clusters are about to start registering the next 20 validators to the SSV contracts, and then they'll be eligible to have their key limits raised once those are submitted to the registry. Cohort 2 onboarding is almost done. So would also expect to see these 9 clusters onboarded to mainnet probably next week with depositable keys. So in general, things are looking really smooth here. For the SSV side of superclusters, very similar to Obol. So those deposits just came in for the 10 validators a little earlier today. And we will see a key limit increase to 50 also probably in the next few days. On the side of testnet 4, so there are 25 clusters that are currently active. There's 180 participants within those clusters, many of which are net new node operators in general to SimpleDBT, which is pretty encouraging when you think about the future mainnet onboarding cohort 3. But within testnet number 4, 17 of 25 clusters now actually have their first active validators. And we would expect to see the remainder of these clusters probably deposited to by the end of this week. There's a couple of them that have some like sort of specific issues where there's replacements. They may take a couple days longer, but in general, making really good progress here. And you'll start to see key limits increased for some of these clusters quite quickly over the next couple weeks. So some of these clusters will run up to 500 validators. Also to note, so the SSV network is going to have a fork in the next basically month and a half, 2 months, at least on the mainnet side. So today the instructions were sent out for all of the operators to update their nodes. The fork is expected to take place on Husky next week. But basically, this is going to bring a bunch of performance improvements is the hope of the SSV team. There's some CPU optimization. There's some optimizations to the way consensus mechanism works. And there will be a lot of time actually for people to sort of dig into the data, including ourselves, and make sure that performance looks good before anything goes forward with the main network. Here is the sample of both the Lido curated module, but also the Lido simple DVT module, as well as the next 10 largest staking providers. And here you can actually see that simple DVT is continuing to have really, really strong performance. It's outperforming 8 of the next 10 staking protocols. So, DVT is working. It's adding net new node operators to Lido. It's decentralizing the Lido node operator set. It's bringing net new node operators to Ethereum. And it's doing all this with really, really strong performance. So very encouraging. And then finally, the Mellow distributed validator vault. As some of you will remember, this was launched about a month ago with the goal of basically driving faster deposits to DVT-based validators within the Lido node operator set. So DVT brings lots of benefits to validator resilience, key security, given the use of DKG, as well as decentralization with all the participants using different clients and infrastructure and hosting in different countries. And so the idea of this vault is really to quicken the pace of adoption of DVT within the node operator set. And in return, users received wrap staked ETH, they receive OBL, SSV, and Mellow points. Since launch, this has facilitated a bit over 2,700 ETH staked to the Lido protocol. That's equivalent to 84 validators that are within simple DVT. One thing to note here, and I think this is pretty exciting, so because there's actually more OBL validators running on simple DVT versus validators that have come from the vault, there's a pretty significant boost to the amount of effective points people get if they're in the vault. So right now, for the equivalent amount you stake in the vault, you're basically getting 21x the amount of OBL points that you would get were the vault equivalent to the number of validators in the simple DVT module for OBL. So definitely something to check out. It's really, really good for, I think, the decentralization of the network. It's a great way to get involved with OBL and SSV, as well as Mellow. So scan the QR code if you're interested. And that's it for the updates from Simple DVT this month. Thanks.
No, thank you, Will. That was great. You keep bringing up amazing progress on simple DVT and the performance. I was blown away by the performance on mainnet. It's really cool. Speaking of really cool, we have Max getting ready to share his research, much talked about minimal bond for CSM. Max, when you're ready, you can take it away, please.
Hello, thank you, and thank you everyone for coming here. Thank you, folks, for inviting me here. Yeah, my name is Max. I'm part of analytics work stream, and today I would be talking about risk assessment for community staking, utilizing bond mitigation. But I've already talked about this a year ago, so feel free to go and bump up this number of views, because this is the application of the framework we've developed a year ago on like the recent suggestion for the bond curve for CSM. So some previous knowledge would be beneficial, but if not, I'll try to wrap it up to make as like digestible as possible. So the agenda is pretty simple. The first point, we update the risk scenarios, like what we expect with what market we are operating in the future. Then we're determining the minimal per validator bond value, like it's again the minimal value given that we're operating on the curve. So we are determining the end of the curve using about like the most risk averse scenario of like greater portion of the stake allocated for the validators bonded lower. The third part is considering reasonable fee for the model for the node operators here, because again, it's like a major part in the whole equation, but it's also the major part of the equation of the node operator actions and incentives. The first point I will be talking about like how we switch from the per validator bond to a bond curve, and the last point is resulting capital efficiency curve. And like what are we talking about? Speaking about the boost, catching up on Will a little bit here. But I'll start with like the zero problem with like what are we talking about here? We're talking about like delegation of stake in some way and delegation of risks, which are like pinned to validator malfunction, being it offline or slashing happening, and the possible rewards of Yale rewards, which is referred as Yale reward steering. And this is the risk we're trying to transfer with the bond curve mechanism. And the second part is the factors that determine the level of the risk and the level of sharing this risk between different actors, like stakers, the protocol itself, and the node operators. And the factors is like the level of rewards on the network, the time to triggerable exits, because it's still not implemented on the mainnet, and like possible ongoing slashing level as a factor determining correlation penalty. So starting from the first on risk scenarios, again, there is like a magnitude of different options on risk scenarios, but I've drafted it to like the most, the three like most crisp to like analyze further. The realistic is basically the idea that everything would be as it's observed in the recent history, like according to our expectations, with the current amount of fees staked in the network. The risk-averse scenario suggests like decrease in the total amount of ETH staked and the total number of validators, so increase in the rewards, which is good overall, but impose greater risk on the validators because this stuff determines the amount of penalties and missed rewards on validators being offline, and also, which is crucial, implying the longer time for the possibility for execution layer triggerable exits. And apocalyptic scenario here is like basically all of the same, plus again, apocalyptic scenario of more than 1% of the network within ongoing slashing happening at the same time, which would lead to correlation penalty switching from 0 ETH to 1 ETH within the current specifications. And the second point, like determining the minimal per validator bond value, we're going from this like two principles here. The first is really straightforward, like the risk transferring realized with the bond should be enough to facilitate any operational errors or mistakes. And this operational error, of course, includes slashing, but even if slashing happens after some period being offline, the bond should be sufficient enough to transfer all of this risk to the node operator. And the second like primitive here is cost of attack. If we suppose, again, building a potentially permissionless way to joining a Lido validator set, we should consider the cost of attack for any intentional malicious behavior, realizing basically the combination of most drastic scenario of like turning off your validator, waiting as long as possible until you would get exited with EIP 7009, and then slashing at the last moment of when it's possible. And while the first principle is like well covered in my previous research, the second is kind of additional, different view on the situation here. And the idea is pretty straightforward. Within different scenarios I've talked before, like the actions of the actor willing to intentionally damage the protocol leads to different multiplier in terms of how much bond would you burn to damage the protocol for some level. And this multiplier is called attack multiplier within my research. And again, on different scenarios, this multiplier could lead to different values, with the apocalyptic scenario, which is in red, leading to like the most drastic multipliers with 1 ETH of correlated slashing penalty. But given the fact that like the initial starting share is 1%, and having more than 1% of total network slashing is like completely apocalyptic scenario, it seems reasonable to focus on realistic and risk-averse scenario to keep the attack multiplier intact. And for realistic scenario, it's less than 50%. For risk-averse, which facilitates most of the, I would say, like bad things from risk transferring perspective that could happen within this stack, keeping this coefficient less than 1, meaning that the potential attacker would spend more is burning the bond than the actual effect on protocol seems reasonable in terms of like sufficient level of disincentivizing any malicious behavior and still providing full cover for any hiccups, including slashings, with some time or some period of offline for the validator. Trying to keep up the schedule. So the third point is like we should determine the fee, not just in terms of like the whole CSM launch, but also to determine the incentives for node operators. And the like starting point here was the testnet capital efficiency, which is basically the multiplier on like plain staking APR potential actor gets participating in CSM, with getting like the multiplier for the stake under operation, and basically the same rewards on the bond minus 10% DAO fee. And with 6% fee, it seems reasonable to bring the same capital, almost the same capital efficiency multiplier as on the testnet, with like exceptional opportunity from my perspective to the market, to the actors to join and participate. And within this, we go to like this, the fourth point is like moving from one number on bond per validator to the bond curve, which is one of the tech implemented to prevent sibling, or more specifically EL stealing or EL rerouting. And the idea here is, again, pretty straightforward. Like penalty for EL stealing is basically the amount of reward selling plus 0.1 ETH, which means simply that any actor willing to perform reward stealing, if he is reasonable, should perform it only if he managed to steal the block that was more than the total bond provided by this node operator. Otherwise, it wouldn't be beneficial for the node operator because the bond would be burned with this 0.1 ETH on top of this, and the protocol wouldn't feel it because the bond would compensate the amount of stolen. So again, the base premise of we have the blocks worth like 100, 200, 400, and 600 ETH. So no amount of bond could prevent potential actor for waiting like for eternity to like find out his golden block. But there is another question for any actor if we introduce the bond curve. And the bond curve is basically the idea that the more validators you get, the less bond per validator needed to be provided. And this is the like dichotomy of like if you have some amount of capital, you can go with one node operator, consolidating all of the capital, benefiting with the discounted bond value, but losing the ability or lowering the ability for EL stealing, as all capital provided is at stake for this. If you go with multiple node operators, you have more opportunities to steal because only each of these node operators is risking the capital on stake for this, but you get lesser capital efficiency as you don't benefit from the discounted bond. And like the idea could be illustrated like quite easily if we go with like the base premise of no curve and just 1.3 ETH per bond per validator. This graph could be misleading. So the example is pretty simple. If you have 13 ETH of total capital, you can go with 10 node operators with one validator, or with one node operator with 10 validators. And if you don't interested in performance stealing strategy, the capital multiplier would be the same. But if you're interested in stealing strategy, the capital multiplier with going with 10 node operators would be much greater, because each of your node operators would be waiting for the block worth more than 1.3 ETH, and it would be waiting for a long time, but you would get some edge here. And supposing like the Ethereum is a dark forest and everybody steal when they have the opportunity, like the best strategy in terms of node operator structure for the actor would be diversifying his capital for multiple node operators, which represents the idea that the capital efficiency is decreasing for the stealing strategy curve. So if you have any amount of capital, your like best point of capital efficiency is having 1.3 ETH of capital on each of your node operators. But if we introduce like additional bond, we can call it node operator bond, meaning that the first validator would be 2.4 ETH, and the second one, and furthermore, would be still the same 1.3 ETH for remaining. The curve inverts, which means that again, no matter are you willing or are you not willing to steal, within this example of 24 ETH, you have these two strategies of stealing and non-stealing, and two strategies of consolidating or non-consolidating, but consolidating strategy, no matter what, brings greater expected capital efficiency. And again, stealing have an edge here, because like if you would find a block worth more than 24 ETH, you could steal it and benefit from this additional rewards. In terms of expected value, it's only like 2% increase or 4% in absolute. But the main reason here that the curve start increasing, that no matter which strategy you're leading to, the optimal strategy for node operator structuring is consolidating them on one entity, which leads to the equilibrium of rational actors operating like risk neutral actors or risk averse actors would prefer consolidating node operators, even if they wouldn't mind stealing some. But as the consolidating happens, the stealing opportunity window shrinks drastically, as like if you consolidate 2 or 3 validators, you are waiting for a block worth more than 4 or 6 ETH in total. So a little bit addition, as like this decision of how would the actor structure his node operators is made on the actor's expectation on future yield market. I've included a little leeway here for like the most risk takers, and like if you're expecting no more than 70% increase in yield rewards compared to like the current market observed from the April till today, the curve would still be invented, with the optimal point being on consolidating. If you are really positive on the upcoming yield market, yes, the curve would invert here, but again, that's a gamble, again, expectations, not again observed history. You can't change the structure of your node operators if you happen to observe a juicy MEF block. And wrapping up, resulting capital efficiency curve with suggested bond curve of starting with 2.4 and continuing with 1.3, and the bonus for early adopters with starting from 1.5 and continuing from 1.3 is, like, from my taste, is pretty great, because it gives greater capital efficiency for early adopters compared to testnet, with limited risk of MEF stealing with like the discounted initial bond, as like the early adopters list is finite. And it gives greater capital efficiency for even permissionless participants with greater than 6.3 ETH of capital compared to testnet. And on the like right hand, if the actor have like significant amount of capital of more than 40 and 60 ETH, it's still almost the same capital efficiency as it was provided with the testnet, with like the actual difference being less than 1% in relative numbers, or 0.5% in absolute numbers of capital efficiency. And I think I need to wrap this up. And here's my wrap up. Feel free to jump in on the research forum. This Blue Dinosaur is me, and put your comment, have a discussion. I'm always welcoming and happy when people speak with me about the bonds. Thank you, folks.
No, thank you, Max. I was hoping we might have had some time to go into the questions that were going back and forth on Twitter, but we'll leave that debate where it is right now. And it's a very interesting one. And I do think you have addressed some of those issues here, but I'm sure the last word has not been said on this thing. So personally, I think it's awesome that this discussion is taking place like in the first place. It's a lot better than just random shilling or FUD. We're just talking about the actual contents, and I think the discussion is really amazing. If all is well, we are showing an oat on from Rock Logic talking about Stereum. We have David. Very glad to have you on board. I have had a chance to play around slightly, just a bit with your with Stereum myself, and I was like, there's so many applications that I've tried, and this one is actually really cool. And like the one thing that struck me first of all was the really cool animations you guys put in. That's just a cool feature that makes this whole thing just it gives it a human touch that you sometimes lack on well, in crypto overall. So David, if you are ready, please take it away, and good luck.
Thank you very much. As already like introduced, basically here today to talk about the Lido CSM node operator integration into Stereum. We have been working on and basically continue to work on right now. First, I want to like talk a little bit about Stereum itself. Maybe people don't know it. Basically, Stereum is a Ethereum node setup and management tool, a GUI-based one, so you don't have to like fiddle around with a lot of CLI. We started developing this in 2021. It's free, it's open source, and it's basically grant and node operation financed. I want to like show off a live demo right now. Basically, I prepared two servers. The first server is one where we're just going to go through the setup itself. I'm going to show you how blazing quick it is. The second server is more for the maintenance side, what you can expect and what we basically already built into. So let's get right into it. As you can see, I already installed, basically downloaded and installed the launcher. The launcher itself uses SSH to connect to the server, which I'm going to do right now. You will be greeted here on the welcome screen. You can do a lot of different things with Stereum. We have here like a one-click installation, which is the one I'm going to show off in this call. You have a custom installation. So if you're more of an expert, we don't only offer stuff for beginners. If you're an expert and you know which components you want on one server and which components you want, for example, on another server, you can stick them together with Stereum as well really easily. And the third option is the config import. Basically, if you already have a server and also running, you can take your whole setup. We basically limiting stuff into setups. You can take a whole setup and move it to another server. But as I said, I'm going to show off the one-click installation. So first of all, you can choose a network. We support multiple networks. We have the Ethereum mainnet, Sepolia, Gnosis, and Oleski. But because I'm going to show off CSM today, we're going to go for the Oleski one. Maybe also interesting for people who run the SDVTM. We also support that. Just needs a little bit more self-configuration right now, at least. So let's go for the CSM node operator preset. In this preset, you will be the next step basically is to show the preset itself. You can see the installed services. You can change them. We support five execution clients right now. Also Ref, if you're interested in running that, as well as 5 of the consensus clients. I'm gonna go with Nethermind and Lighthouse today. And just like move on. You have the option, as you can see, to set the installation path. You can also set up if you want the clients to start off the installation. For CSM right now, we have the math relays. The math relays themselves are already pre-selected for you, so you don't have to make the work. Then we have multiple synchronization options. In this case, I'm gonna go with a checkpoint from Lodestar, so we can like show this a little bit quicker. And that's basically already it when it comes to the setup part or the configuration part. You have an overview here of the services, where they get installed and what category they're from. Then we go for next and basically get into the installation process. If you should run into a problem with the installation process, this can happen sometimes. You basically have a status down here. You can click this. As you can see, these have subtasks. You can open the subtasks, and if there is a problem, you just come on our Discord and basically post it in there. We're gonna help you out as soon as we can. While this is running, maybe a little bit about the tech stack itself. So basically what this does right now, it uses Ansible in combination with Docker to set up your server. It configures the firewall, it configures all the clients themselves. So it's basically all already connected as soon as we get out of this. The front end itself is written with Electron. As you can see, we're basically already done. Can go here into the setup. All of them will turn on one by one, and they're all, as I said, already pre-connected. We're just gonna wait a little bit. It's gonna take a few seconds. If you never have run a node, maybe also interesting for you, because this is a good opportunity to get into node operation if you were ever interested in that. The requirements for this is basically the same as for any full node. 2 terabytes storage, at least. For me, what I would recommend beginners is like at least 16 cores. Best is if you go with a CPU that has like at least a benchmark of 20K. It's just more stress-free to work like that. And 32 gigabytes of RAM and a broadband internet connection. Also important for Stereum to run, to connect to your server and run the setup, you have to use either Ubuntu 20.20.04 or 24.04. As you can see, this is already basically done. Right now we still get listing keys errors because it's gonna try to do the checkpoint, use the checkpoint to start syncing. That doesn't stop us that much. When you go into when you go here now into CSM, you can like pretty simply set up a key. You just load this in, you generate the key first with something like Wagyu. You put this in here, then you can submit your keys, and with your submitted keys, which I've already done here, you can go on back to the launcher itself. You go on to the staking page. Here you can like select your key. In this case, the validator key file. Just put this in here. Go for your password. Then you just wait. I hope I didn't like mischecked. Okay, it takes a little bit longer because we still have to wait for Lighthouse to get the to get the checkpoint. I'm gonna maybe change in the meanwhile, basically, so you can see this and we don't have to wait for it to turn on. Because as I said, I already have like a working one. What you basically would do here is you would go into the here into the import. You would put this in here. In this case, I can also put this in here because these run on 2 different operators. Basically, put this in here. Wait for the import. Usually doesn't take a long time. If I, as I said, if I didn't like make a validator, miss the password, this key is now important. It takes a little bit. As you can see, it's already here. Because it's in the queue, it won't get much of a status here. But we already run a key on this CSM operator, so that's basically no problem. The next thing, if you got your node operator ID, this happens when you submit your first key. What you can do, this is basically the only real configuration step that's left for us manually. What you will have to do is go into the ejector and set up the correct operator ID. In this case, this would be 2617. I can put this in here. And after this, my operator is basically completely up and running. Obviously, I still have to wait for the sync. This is the node we just set up. But here in the one that's already set up, you can see as soon as your node is synced, you will receive some rewards. In this case, I have non-claim rewards, so non-claimed rewards. We also support, let me just check the list. We also currently support slashing, unclaimed rewards, as I said, withdrawal submits, penalties, exit requests. If your operator is inactive, you will see this on the right side here, as well as bond notifications. So if you ever should fall under insufficient bond, Stereum will basically tell you this on the right. But you can also set this up yourself, some alerts via Prometheus and Grafana. Also maybe interesting because if you run a CSM node operator, you obviously have to set a block fee recipient. In our case, this is already done automatically, so you don't have to worry about this. This is network-based, so as soon as we go live on mainnet with the CSM, it will basically be a different one, obviously. Yeah, other than this, if there are some questions, we are like free to ask. I can show off the control page a little bit in the meanwhile. We have some, as you can see, you have a nice overview of the current storage volume, the storage themselves, the disk speed, the sync. We will get soon like a status from the network, but because this is from your perspective as a peer, it's usually, you should probably take this with a grain of salt. You can see the status of the two keys right now. We only have 32 because the other one is still in the deposit queue. Other than that, I would say if there are like big questions, I'm trying to keep myself short here, I probably could talk about the elements themselves for hours. You can go here in as well. You can create a setup. You can edit these setups as well. So as I said, if you're interested in running this on multiple places, you can pretty simply do that. And you can pretty simply do that. And basically just build your dream setup.
David, I have a question.
Yes,
I remember,
please.
I remember,
Yeah.
I think one of my first staking experiences has been a while ago. I think it was one of the first, not one of the first, but a very early iteration of ETH Docker. And the setup was, it's easy now already, but it was easy back then as well. And something wasn't working, and somebody asked me, "Can you share the logs?" And I just had no clue where to share the logs. This is I think it's like a year and a half ago. I don't know.
Yeah.
So how would that work on your
Okay,
like
like
more,
so,
I don't know if this is advanced controls because on the one end it's pretty basic, but if you have to dig in deeper, like could you share just a bit on how to do that?
I can share this whole process for you if you want to. So basically, if you want to share the logs, that's pretty simple in Stereum itself. You can basically go on to like whatever client or whatever service you need in this case. You go on this button, and what's gonna happen is like, as you can see, you already see the logs. We have 3 different options here. You can export the last 150 lines. You can export all of them. Takes a while usually. Or if you are like need customized ones, you can set them for date or line. You can switch through them if you have multiple setups on one node, which if you got a good enough machine, why not? You would also like you can also switch through the setups themselves. We have links to documentation here. You can basically also resync really quickly if you're interested. If that's something you sometimes have to do. Then we have like a restart. We have start and stop, and maybe a highlight. If you're more of an expert and you don't like how we set the configuration, you can basically simply change this in here. This is all open for you to edit. We can, but you can also, if you're more of like a beginner, use the settings themselves we set up. I hope that answers the question to the
Yeah, no,
extent.
that's cool. I didn't realize the features there were right there, which is a great place for them, of course. Do you offer like more advanced features like well, vouch is probably a bit too much, but maybe we have Veru coming up. Do you know that's from Serenita, like a multi-node validator. Do you plan to offer stuff like that, or do you plan to integrate stuff like that?
You mean a validator is connected to multiple nodes outside nodes? Is this correct?
Yeah, so it's like Veru. It's a bit like vouch,
Yes.
but Veru is more it's more compatible with it's compatible with Web3 signer, for example. So it's not tied to Dirk, and it's you can I don't know if you can hot swap it, but it's like exchangeable for other validator clients.
I can show something off. What we use is basically external connections. So what you can do in Stereum itself is, if you don't want to use the local Prism one, you just go for external one. You set up the installation path. This is basically just a placeholder service. This has an external source, which you can set and find out pretty easily. Right now, there's still like a client selection in here because Prism does it a little bit differently, the outside connection. But you would basically set the service up. I'm just gonna put anything, doesn't matter right now. You can basically set this up, install this pretty easily. It usually doesn't take long as well. And you can switch between them. This is obviously still manually right now. I don't know if they do it automatically, but if not, if you have multiple nodes, it's pretty easy to switch between them with the modify node feature.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's cool that it looks polished, but there's also so many like customizable options. That's really nice. I think that really fits with the target audience. So people starting out, it's like a one-click install. That's what you want, but you grow as a staker, right? You kind of have to, but you do just because it's. I mean, if you really do it for the money, I'm guessing there's probably better ways. So it's really like an ideal as well, or just, at the very least, just something you're really enthusiastic about. So people do grow, and then you want to be able to have a tool that grows with you, I guess. We're getting some comments about the animations as well. They are really cool. Like, who made those?
We have a Japanese artist. This is like a long-time friend of mine. I'm gonna share, if that's okay, like maybe his Instagram after. Does some really, really great line work, some really great stuff in Japan as well. So I would love if you guys follow him. I'm pretty sure he would be like really glad about it as well.
Oh, sure, but just shout out his handle or his name and
It's at Proudhands on Instagram. You can basically find his work. I think he didn't post for a while, but I'm pretty sure if he sees like some growth, he would start again.
Okay, cool. That's great. Thanks. Yeah, David, I don't think there's any other questions in the chat. So we do have to continue, but thank you so much.
I
This was
thank you
great.
for inviting us. It's really, really nice to show this off. And if anyone has any questions about it, as I said, you can just go to the website, just go onto the Discord. If you have some like doubts about wanting to CSM node operator, you're not sure if your machine can handle it, or you have any other like small problems you basically run into Stereum with, just come on the Discord, just ask the question. We're basically here to help you out.
Yeah,
So
great.
thank you very
Thanks.
much.
That's awesome. Thanks, David. Up next we have Drew talking about commit boost, and we actually also have Kobe, who is like a sidecar. I don't know. Today he'll be available for more tech commands. I think tech questions. So very happy to have both of you on. And please take it away. This is the final segment of this episode, and yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for having us on, and appreciate the Lido community for listening in today. It's cool presentations before us, but here to talk about Commit Boost. Some of you may have heard about it or saw some posts on Lido. I'll show a bit on the agenda we'll go through, and here's the QR link to our first post to the Lido community. We'll talk a bit about what commit boost, and generally there's trends that are unlocking across the staking community, some challenges in the direction we're potentially headed, and then this is where commit boost comes in and why it was really created. Tell you a little bit more about how it works, some milestones we've hit in timeline, and then ways to get involved, sort of call to action. So with that, there's this general trend within the research community, and this is some quotes from some EF researchers across RIG and of course Vitalik that have talked about, today you have this mechanism where proposers, it's their turn to build a block, but and they have a monopoly over that, but what they end up doing is outsourcing that, and they lose quite a bit of the autonomy over that. And these are a couple quotes from research where it talks about what if the proposers could give templates or make more specifications around how the block must be constructed. And I think Vitalik says it best, as usual, where he says, what if we could make, for instance, 80% of the block be about an inclusion list? And you could think of that inclusion list in a lot of different ways, but essentially expressing the ethos of that next proposer. And then it would force the downstream participants in the PBS pipeline, such as the relay and builder, to abide by those rules. And I would say about a year ago or earlier this year, people started to realize this. And there's been a bunch of teams building towards this vision, the infrastructure and everything that's required. But this digs deeply into past commentary, including Pepsi, which came out of the REG group with Barnaby. But with all this is probably, I'd say, 5 to 10 teams building around this. The challenge is a lot of them, the way they were going about this was to create a fork of MetBoost, for instance, or a new sidecar. And in the future, proposers are going to face a lot more decisions around what they quote unquote commit to. Today, it's just a block header, but it's likely to be more things. And this can come through. And I think the community's heard about things like pre-confirmations, but this could be inclusion lists. It could be block space futures, top-up block auctions. There's a whole host of ideas. But when this is implemented via forks and different implementations of sidecars, there's a couple of risks that we started to see play out. Fragmentation is number one, and this impacts validators, but also the Ethereum network. For sophisticated stakers, they probably can run multiple sidecars, but don't want to, at least the ones we've spoken to or prefer not to. And for home stakers or solo validators, this becomes quite difficult. We just saw a great presentation where a lot of these tools are streamlined, but having a home staker have to choose, I want to run 5 sidecars, what all that even means is tough to navigate. So that's the number one risk we saw. And then second is developer complexity. So when there are hard forks and upgrades in Ethereum, the challenge is that even with just MEV Boost, it always is one of the things we have to think about. But if we had 10 MEV Boosts, 5 MEV Boosts flying around, or different versions of that, it'd be an additional load on those teams who are already carrying a lot for us. The last is some of these sidecars, they are VC backed. Almost all of them are open source, so it's less about that. But Flashbots has done a fantastic job historically around MetBoost and just keeping it really as a public good. They don't monetize it, and the ethos of that is something I personally really strongly believe in, and Commit Boost is about. And so what we want to do is have a solution or option out there that helps to solve these things. Is a public good. We don't plan to monetize. There's a 501c3, and I'll get into that in a moment. But this is sort of why Commit Boost was created. And so we have this vision in the future where we give proposers back autonomy to trust the million-plus validators that are out there to express the ethos of Ethereum. And then there's these risks that are starting to emerge that we're hoping to mitigate. So what is Commit Boost? I'll start with a qualitative sort of discussion around not only the software, but just generally this community that we're helping to shepherd. And then we'll get into the technical details in the next slide. But Commit Boost, its mission is it's a not-for-profit. It's a 501c3, fully grant-backed. There's no token, no monetization, and the sole focus is education around open source software, but also development and sustainment of Commit Boost, the software. And the idea here is to have a 24/7 team, follow the sun model that is helping to support this software. The product itself is a new sidecar. but it's one sidecar that validators can run and still get access to all the commitments that we've talked about previously. And so the idea is, let's just standardize the last mile communication between the proposers and these commitments or proposer commitment protocols. And that's where Commit Boost sits. And so they can run one sidecar, they can opt into PBS, they can opt into inclusion lists, they can opt into pre-confirmations, they can opt into pre-confirmation for one team, then easily switch to the next just by opting out of one module and opting into another. And so that's where we're focused. And what it comes down to is standardizing how really a signature is provided by the validator. A majority, next is increased safety. A majority of the Commit Boost code is actually around safety. It isn't so much the standardization. And what I mean by this is we've attached extensions, things like monitoring tools, safety checks, additional fallbacks, proactive OPSEC risk mitigation tools to help validators as they're making commitments to have all these tools in their hands to mitigate risk tied to this, so that the Ethereum network isn't at risk of a validator missing a slot, and it continues to be robust. And this includes things like even just running the PBS module on Commit Boost, you get out of the box 25 plus metrics and transparency across the transaction supply chain that's automatically uploaded into Grafana. So it's just things like that that we have built into this. I touched on this, but neutrality. The Commit Boost is just standardizing the last mile communication. It's not it's restaking agnostic, it's pre-conf agnostic, it's a proposer commitment agnostic. It really doesn't limit anything downstream. And so if you were a validator and you wanted to build a block only through Suave, you could, for instance, specify that as, hey, the transactions must be packed, or the block must be packed via those TEs and those builders. Security-wise, it is open source, it is community reviewed. We talk about this next sort of bullet, but there are now 70 plus teams that are helping with this. Has a broad set of validators who've done this for a very long time, not only contributing code, but contributing ideas. And then we are getting it audited, and we're moving into that actually this week with a code freeze. I touched on this, and there'll be more about this tomorrow as we announce moving towards mainnet, but 70 plus teams that are helping with this. It started with just a few, and I'll turn it over to Kubi right here. Just a few, and Kubi was one of the early participants of this who helped us envision this and build it. But now we have a ton of teams across the whole ecosystem, spanning client teams, validators, restaking, L2s, researchers. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but why don't I pass it over to you, Kubi, to talk a bit about the technical architecture.
Yep, sounds good. Hey everyone, Kubi here. Good to be back on the community call. I'm just gonna go into the high-level architecture of Commit Boost, and also just go a little bit into some of the motivations that are behind some of the technical design choices. And so as Drew said, the context here really is, so what we're thinking about, how do we avoid having to run like all these different sidecars, and how can we basically encapsulate some of the logic that these separate instances will facilitate. And that's basically like some form of communication to interact with the proposer commitment protocol. And then have that compartmentalized in a way where the logic is separated out, but you have a unified sort of platform underneath that can instantiate or access to this different proposer commitment protocols. And so the solution that we basically came up with is, first of all, having this notion of like this base platform, which has like this launcher component. And the launcher is basically responsible for then instantiating like multiple instances, or potentially just single instances of how to tap into a proposer commitment protocol, and that is via instantiating a module. And here we basically just leverage existing containerization technology to just be able to put certain safeguards into place around operational security, as Drew said. So these are just simple things around making sure resource consumptions around like CPU usage, disk, and memory and things like that can be controlled by node operators, so as just to give them more security around the different modules that they can actually run, and also limit the risk of it taking the potentially entire box down. But then additionally, Commit Boost also provides just a bunch of primitives out of the box to the module creators and gives them standardized interfaces. So what does that mean? So one of the things that's very important for node operator is just analytics and monitoring. So for example, we provide a bunch of primitives so that it's very easy for module creators to create like metrics. And then we have like a really nice way to then, for example, tap into Prometheus and Grafana, which are like just standard tools that are just being used across the board, to then basically keep on top of what these modules are doing in real time. And not just, this is not just about resource usage or what these modules are doing on the box itself, but also how they're interacting with the external protocol. So for example, this would be within the context of commit boost, or specifically if you think about PBS and the MEF boost protocol, this could be, for example, what kind of relays is your module talking to, what are the response rates and things like that. The other thing is that essentially what a proposer commitment is the request for the proposer to commit to something. So in the context of PBS or MEF boost, this would be a proposer committing to a header based on certain kinds of rules. But there are other things that the proposer can commit to. For example, in the context of pre-confirmations, you might want to make sure that like certain transactions are included in a block. So you might want to verify that there are certain things are included before committing to a header. And there's additional logic that these modules can basically run. And so another thing that we basically provide is like the standardized interface of requesting a signature. And here we placed a lot of efforts and some of the research is still ongoing to making sure that this can be done in a safe way. So for example, what we really wanted to avoid is like having these modules requesting signature from the consensus keys directly and like potentially just exposing risk that the validators could be slashed in protocol, for example. And so like some of the things that we've done is just the enablement of proxy keys, using different signing domains and just a bunch of other stuff just to make sure that none such potential malicious signature requests can be done by these third-party modules. And then the last thing I just want to cover on a high level is that from day one, a lot of effort is being made to make sure that this entire thing is backwards compatible. So just think about, again, PBS and MEF boost. For example, no CL changes are required, and we just tap into the existing Builder API, and no changes are required whatsoever. And then for new types of commitments that are being made, initially these signatures, again, through proxy keys and certain safeguards, will be enabled through tapping into existing key management software that node operators are already running. So examples here are Web3 Signer and Dirk, but we're also speaking to DBT and also to validators or node operators that use a more monolithic setup. For example, if they use the consensus client keys directly in the VC. So some of these items still need to be ironed out, but overall, the goal is basically to abstract all of that away from the module creators. We create like one safe standardized interface for these signatures to be requested, and then basically do all the heavy lifting in the background and the engagement again with the community and the different tools that are being used by node operators to enable this. Yes, and this basically wraps up the architecture overview.
Awesome. Thanks, Kubi. Well, I know we're close to time, but just quickly go through some milestones. We've had Kubi touched on the shipping side, but just some things to highlight. A lot of the research we've done is just engaging with a lot of validators. They have a bunch of different setups, and we're just trying to configure as much as possible to give the whole network of Ethereum the ability to run commit boost. Like Kubi mentioned, it's PBS compatible with a whole host of extensions. We're already testing in Husky with hundreds of thousands of validators. I'll provide the link in the next slide, but we also posted on Lido through, I think it's called the Perch, maybe butchering the name of this, but a way to engage with Lido no operators. We've asked for feedback and more teams to engage there. Then as Kubi mentioned, we're just working with all the ways that you could be able to sign on things outside of just a header, which is done through PBS. Community-wise, mentioned this, 70 plus teams, 12 direct contributors. There's 5+ modules that are already being built on Commit Boost across pre-comps, inclusion list, and a few other things. We do have community calls going. This is an open source public good, so we hope it's driven by those that are using it, part of the community that's being led by Alex Stokes. Yeah, we've set up a 501c3 or setting one up with multiple grants, including a request to the Lido community, which I think was approved, or at least details published on the post today, which we're super excited about. But there's other organizations that have provided funding as well. And then we also, just to help the community push along in this journey, is helped pay for and host Helder, which a bunch of teams are using. And this is mainly a persistent testnet to quickly iterate on proposer commitments. And then the last slide is just, or next last slide is just timeline. This is our progress and all those milestones that have been hit. We're now going into audit, so we expect commit boost to be in mainnet within the next month, and we're super excited about that. And then just increase adoption throughout the end of the year and into next year. If you want to get involved, here's a couple QR codes. One is our repo. You can learn more there, submit PRs, provide feedback. The other is the post I mentioned on the Lido forum, research forum. Please fill out, reach out, whatever we can do to get you working with us and getting feedback. So with that, I think that's all we have.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. That was really cool. A question I have, like overall, this is putting like more power into the hands of the validators, in essence. I think we've learned from Spider-Man that with power comes responsibility. I think MEV Boost introduced responsibilities for node operators that we didn't really have before. We're talking about censorship now and choosing which relays to choose, besides latency and technical issues like that. So where do you think this is going from the node operator perspective? This is our target audience of the call after all. So what are responsibilities and tasks are they going to get with this movement in general?
Yeah, there's, I think one of our community members wrote a great quote on one of the slides we use, but it's kind of like they're going to have more decisions to make over, other than just a local payload or a payload built by a builder, if they choose to. They can still have that, but they're likely going to be missing out on rewards related to things like pre-comps. How I personally expect this to play out is there'll probably be a few of these proposer commitments that accrue value, or at least provide value to the end users of Ethereum, whether that's L2s or users themselves, that will pay for these services from validators. And so I expect some culmination around 4 or 5 of these over time. I don't expect personally there to be 100 plus of these commitments flying around in the network. And I think the benefit of this is that today, as a block is constructed, proposers sort of turn over all that autonomy to 3, 4 relays and 2.5 builders, given the current metrics. And at least in this instance, we now allow for at least 1 million plus Ethereum validators to express the ethos of Ethereum, or at least have the opportunity to do that and be able to run an inclusion list module and say, do not censor my block. It's quite a powerful feature I see progressing here.
Yeah, cool.
With that said, yeah, there are risks, right? With this, you give autonomy, power to people. There are risks of that, and we're speaking with some of the teams that are out there that are assessing risk, like Rated, a few others, to help get their hands around this. And in the future, when these commitments are ready, they're there to help guide validators just as they do today across a whole host of things.